Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. In the previous lecture, we have talked about the mechanism of pulmonary ventilation in detail. In today's session, we are going to talk about the elastic forces of the lungs. What we are going to learn in this lecture is, number one, we will describe the compliance of the lungs, the determinants and the factors affecting the compliance. We are going to define the surfactant, describe its composition, describe the mechanism of secretion of surfactant and the factors affecting surfactant secretion, and also the functions of the surfactant. And the last topic that we are going to discuss is the infant respiratory distress syndrome. So we start with the first topic, that is the compliance of the lungs. Before we start with the compliance of the lungs, we are going to see what are the forces that are acting on the lungs. Now there are two types of forces that act on the lungs. One are the forces which keep the alveoli open or which prevent the alveolar collapse, while the other are the forces that promote alveolar collapse. Again, I am repeating that there are two types of forces acting on the lungs. These forces are opposing forces. One group of forces tend to keep the alveoli open, and the other group of forces cause or promote the collapse of the alveoli. Now, transmural pressure gradient is the force which tends to keep the alveoli open. We have discussed in detail about the transmural pressure gradient in our previous lecture. Now, transmural pressure gradient is the transpulmonary or the transthoracic pressure gradient which keeps the lungs expanded. The second force which keeps the lung expanded or which keeps the alveoli open is the pulmonary surfactant. It is the substance which reduces the surface tension, or it opposes the surface tension in the lung alveoli, and surface tension is the force which promotes the alveolar collapse. Now we will see what are the forces which promote the alveolar collapse. Two forces are there. One are the elastic tissue forces caused by connective tissue fibers in the lungs. We know that the lungs are made up of elastic tissue, and elastic tissue in the lungs has a recoiling tendency when it is stretched, and this recoiling tendency promotes the alveolar collapse. Second elastic force which acts on the lung and tend to cause the collapse of the alveoli is alveolar surface tension. Now this alveolar surface tension is the force which is caused by the air-water interface of the fluid lining the inner surface of the alveoli. Now these are the two elastic forces acting on the lungs and which promote the alveolar collapse, and we are going to discuss these two forces in detail under the heading of the lung compliance, and then we will see the role of surfactant in reducing the surface tension. So we will begin with the topic of compliance. Now, compliance is basically the stretchability or the distensibility of the lungs. Literal meaning of compliance is distensibility of the lungs. Now, greater the compliance, greater will be the stretchability of the lungs. Now we can define this compliance as the extent to which the lungs will expand for each unit increase in transpulmonary pressure if enough time is allowed to reach equilibrium. I am repeating that compliance, which is a measure of stretchability or distensibility of the lungs, can be defined as the extent to which the lungs will expand for each unit change or increase in transpulmonary pressure if time is allowed to reach the equilibrium. By lung expansion, we mean the change in lung volume, and for a unit change in transpulmonary pressure. In normal healthy adults, the total compliance of the both lungs is about 200 ml per centimeter of water. It means if there is a change in the transpulmonary pressure of 1 centimeter of water, the lung will expand by 200 ml. The change in lung volume will be 200 ml. This is the normal compliance of the both lungs in a healthy person. And this is the compliance of the lungs alone. But in a normal healthy person, in a living person, the lungs are present in the thoracic cavity. So when the compliance of the lungs and the thoracic cavity is together measured, it is reduced to about half of this value. So compliance of the lungs and thorax together is 110 ml per centimeter of water. Now the question is that why is the compliance of the lungs and thoracic wall together less as compared to the compliance of the lungs alone? Now this is because of the fact that the thoracic wall, it is not as much elastic as the lungs are. So when the lungs are in the thorax, within the thoracic cavity, thoracic wall is going to put a limit on the expansion of the lungs, and the compliance of the both together is 110 ml per centimeter of water. Now how can we calculate the value of the compliance? The formula to calculate the compliance of the lungs is delta V divided by delta P, where delta V is the change in the lung volume and delta P is the change in the transpulmonary pressure. So during normal breathing, about 500 ml of air enters or leave the lungs. So delta V will be 500 ml, and there is a change of 2.5 centimeters of water in the pleural pressure or the transpulmonary pressure. Now pleural pressure is equal to the transpulmonary pressure, or we can say in the other way that transmural pressure or the transpulmonary pressure is considered to be equal to the change in the pleural pressure, because the alveolar pressure is equal to 0 at the end of inspiration as well as at the end of expiration. By 0 centimeters of water, we mean that there is no gradient between the atmospheric pressure and the alveolar air pressure. So it is referred to as 0. So the difference of alveolar pressure and the pleural pressure will be equal to the change in the pleural pressure. That's why we can say that transpulmonary pressure is equal to the pleural pressure change. So during normal respiration, the change in the pleural pressure is 2.5 centimeters of water. At the beginning of inspiration, the pleural pressure is -5 centimeters of water, and during inspiration it decreases to -7.5 centimeters of water. So difference is 2.5 centimeters of water. So this is our delta P. So when we divide delta V, that is 500 ml, with delta P, that is 2.5 centimeters, we get the answer 200 ml. 200 ml for a unit change in the transpulmonary pressure is the normal compliance of the lungs. That is how the value is calculated. Now compliance can be static or it can be dynamic. This depends how the compliance is measured. If the compliance is measured during breath holding, this is known as static compliance. And if the compliance is measured during regular breathing, it is known as dynamic compliance. I am repeating this again. The difference between static and dynamic compliance is just the way we measure it. If it is measured during breath holding, then this is known as static compliance, and if it is measured during regular breathing, this is called as dynamic compliance. Now in normal individual, both the way of measuring compliance will give the same results, or we can say that in healthy individuals the static and dynamic compliance are equal, they give the same value. Now this graph shows us the compliance diagram. This is called as the compliance diagram of the lungs. The compliance diagram of the lungs shows the change in the lung volume with change in the pleural pressure. Why the pleural pressure is written here? Just because of the fact that we just discussed that the transmural pressure or the transpulmonary pressure is equal to the pleural pressure change. So on the x-axis we have the pleural pressure change during respiration, and on the y-axis we have the change in lung volume given in liters. We can see from this diagram that it has two curves, inspiratory curve and the expiratory curve. Again I am repeating that the compliance diagram, it has two curves, the inspiratory compliance curve and the expiratory compliance curve. Now this is because of the fact that the relation is different during inspiration and expiration. The relation of change in the pressure to the change in lung volume. Again I am repeating this point, that compliance diagram consists of two curves, inspiratory compliance curve and the expiratory compliance curve. We have two curves because the relationship between the pleural pressure and the lung volume, it is different during inspiration and expiration. Now question is, why this relation is different during inspiration and expiration? The answer to this question is the difference in the elastic behavior of the lung during inspiration and expiration. Elastic tissue in the lungs behaves differently when it is being stretched during inspiration as compared to when it is kinked back or retracted during expiration. So this difference in the elastic behavior of the lungs causes the compliance curve to follow a different path during inspiration and during expiration. Now due to these two curves, a loop is formed. The inspiratory compliance curve and the expiratory compliance curve, they form a loop, and this is known as loop of hysteresis. Again I am repeating, due to difference in the elastic behavior of the lungs during inspiration and expiration, the compliance curve follow different path during inspiration and expiration, and it forms two curves, inspiratory compliance curve and the expiratory compliance curve, which form a loop, and this loop is known as loop of hysteresis. So this is about the compliance diagram, and we can see from this diagram that for pleural pressure change of about 2.5 centimeters of water, the change in lung volume is 0.5 liter. Now we will move on to the determinants of the compliance of the lungs. Now compliance of the lungs, it depends upon two important factors. The first are the elastic forces of the lung tissue, and the second are the elastic forces caused by the surface tension of the fluid lining the inside of the alveoli. The two forces that we talked about in the beginning of the lecture: elastic forces of the lung tissue and the elastic forces caused by the surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli. Now we are going to discuss these two forces or the factors in detail one by one. Now first we are going to talk about the elastic forces of the lung tissue. The elastic forces of the lung tissue are caused by the elastin and collagen fibers present in the lung parenchyma. Mainly it depends upon the elastin. Now when the lungs are deflated, the elastic fibers are in contracted state or the kinked state. When these fibers are in contracted or kinked state, they have less tendency to recoil. But when the lungs expand, the fibers become stretched, and the lungs are expanded by the transmural pressure gradient, which is mainly dependent on the pleural pressure. So the force which expands the lung is the transmural pressure gradient or the pleural pressure, and when the lung expand, these fibers are stretched. Which fibers are stretched? The elastic fibers, the elastic tissue in the lungs is stretched, and when the elastic tissue is stretched, it will exert more elastic force, means the recoiling tendency in the lungs will increase. Now the elastic forces caused by the elastin in the lungs, it represent 1/3 of the total elastic forces. It represents 1/3 of the total elastic forces of the lungs. Now 2/3 of the elastic forces in the lungs is caused by the surface tension, which is the other force in the lung, other elastic force in the lung. Now surface tension force, it represents 2/3 of the elastic forces of the lungs. Now greater the surface tension, lesser is the compliance of the lungs. So surface tension force, it has an inverse relationship with the lung compliance. Greater the surface tension, lesser the lung compliance. So it means that in normal or in healthy individuals, there should be a decreased or reduced surface tension. Now first we will see what is surface tension and how it is caused, and then we will see how this surface tension force is decreased. Now surface tension is caused by the presence of air-water interface in the alveoli. The surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli is 50 dynes per centimeter. This is the value of the surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli. Now this diagram will show us in detail what is the surface tension force. As we just talked, that surface tension force is because of presence of air-water interface. Now what is air-water interface? Air-water interface is present at the surface of the fluid. Now these are the water molecules. The water molecules which are present below the surface, they are attracted in all direction equally. But those molecules which are present on the surface, they are not equally attracted in all directions. We can see it in the enlarged view. These are the water molecules present on the surface, and these are the water molecules present below the surface. Now these molecules are equally attracted in all direction, but these molecules are not equally attracted in all direction. There is no force above them to balance these forces. So this will produce a cohesive force which will tend to cause retraction or recoiling of the molecules present on the surface. So this will create the surface tension. The unequal attraction of molecules in the surface layer. This will cause surface tension. The same is present in the lungs. Now this is the diagram of an alveolus. This is the epithelium of the alveolus, in which we can see two types of cells are present. We have already discussed in the first lecture. Type 1 pneumocytes are there, or type 1 alveolar epithelial cells, and we have type 2 pneumocytes or the type 2 alveolar epithelial cells. This is the fluid which is lining the inner surface of the alveoli. Now this fluid is responsible for causing the surface tension in the same way that we just has seen in the previous slide. Now the molecules which is present in the surface layer, they will cause the cohesive forces between the water molecules because they have unequal attraction. They have an air-water interface. So this will cause a retractive force, a recoiling force, which will tend to collapse this alveoli. Now this surface tension in the alveolus tends to create a positive pressure, and it tends to cause the collapse of the alveolus. Now the amount of pressure generated in the alveolus can be calculated by this formula. The pressure which tend to cause the collapse of the alveolus, it can be calculated by this formula, where pressure is equal to 2T divided by R. This is called as law of Laplace. Now this surface tension in the lung alveoli is reduced because of the presence of surfactant. It's a substance which is secreted by type 2 alveolar epithelial cells, and it is the force which prevents the collapse of the alveoli by reducing the surface tension. So surfactant reduces the surface tension to between 5 and 30 dynes per centimeter. Without surfactant, the surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli is 50 dynes per centimeter, and because of surfactant, it can be reduced to as low as 50 dynes per centimeter. In detail, we are going to see the role of surfactant in the subsequent slides. Now this diagram shows us the effect of air-water interface and surface tension on the lung compliance. Again, on the x-axis we have the pleural pressure, and on the y-axis we have the change in the lung volume. On one side we have the air-filled lung, and here we have the saline filled lung. When the lungs are filled with saline, the transmural pressure or the pleural pressure which is required to expand the lungs or which is required to increase the lung volume, it is 3 times less than the pressure required to expand the air-filled lungs. This shows the importance of the surface tension force and its contribution towards the elastic forces of the lungs. As we just discussed, that surface tension contributes 2/3 to the elastic forces of the lung. So the saline, in the saline filled lungs, this air-water interface is removed and surface tension effect is not there. Therefore, it is easier to expand the lungs with a very little change in the transpulmonary pressure. Now coming to the conditions or the factors that can affect the lung compliance. First we will see the conditions which decrease the lung compliance. Now lung compliance is decreased in different pathological or abnormal conditions, which are: number 1, pulmonary fibrosis. Now pulmonary fibrosis is a pathological condition in which the lung elastic tissue is replaced by the fibrous tissue. Now fibrous tissue is not as stretchable as the elastic tissue, so the lung compliance is decreased. It means that to stretch the lungs, a greater change in the transmural pressure is required. Similarly, in scarring of the lung, again scar tissue is not stretchable. So in scarring of the lungs, the lung compliance is decreased. Next is thickening of the pleura. Now pleura is the outer layer on the lungs, outer membranes on the lungs. If the pleura is thickened, again it will interfere with the expansion of the lungs and it will decrease the compliance of the lungs. Then if surfactant is not present in the fluid lining the alveoli. Surfactant is a substance that reduces the surface tension. So if the surfactant is not there, there will be increase in surface tension, and increase in surface tension will decrease the lung compliance. We have discussed that surface tension and the lung compliance are inversely related to each other. So when there is no surfactant, surface tension is high and lung compliance is decreased. Then is pleural effusion. Pleural effusion is accumulation of fluid in the pleural cavity. Accumulation of fluid, excess fluid in the pleural cavity interferes with the lung expansion and decreases the lung compliance. Then next condition is paralysis of respiratory muscles. If respiratory muscles are paralyzed, it is difficult for the thoracic cage to expand, and therefore there is difficulty in expansion of the lungs as well. Then kyphosis and scoliosis also interfere with the lung expansion. Now kyphosis and scoliosis are chest wall abnormalities that interfere with the normal lung expansion and decrease the lung compliance. So these are different conditions, abnormal or pathological conditions in which lung compliance is decreased. Now we will see the conditions in which compliance of lungs is increased. There are two conditions in which lung compliance is increased. One is old age and second is emphysema. As the person grows older, there is loss of elastic tissue in the lungs. Due to loss of elastic tissue in the lungs, the recoiling tendency in the lungs is decreased and it is easier for the lungs to expand. So in old age, the lung compliance is increased. Emphysema is a pathological condition in which there is loss of elastic tissue of the lungs, and due to loss of elastic tissue in the lungs, the lung compliance is increased. Means it is easy to expand the lungs with a less change in the transpulmonary pressure. So these were the different conditions which affect the lung compliance. Now we are going to talk about the surfactant, its role in reduction of the surface tension. Now surfactant is surface active agent which is secreted by type 2 alveolar epithelial cells. Now type 2 alveolar epithelial cells constitute about 10% of the alveolar epithelium. These are also known as type 2 pneumocytes or granular pneumocytes because they contain granules consisting of lipid inclusions. Now surfactant secretion, it begins in the fetus in about 30th week of gestation. I am repeating that surfactant first appear in the fetus in about 30th week of gestation. The secretion of surfactant is completed by about 37th week of gestation. It is secreted from type 2 alveolar epithelial cells. Now there are different factors that can stimulate the surfactant secretion or inhibit the surfactant secretion. Now these are the factors that stimulate the surfactant secretion. Epinephrine stimulates surfactant secretion. Glucocorticoids also stimulate the surfactant secretion. Contact of the air with the airways also stimulate the type 2 alveolar epithelial cells to secrete the surfactant. Then thyroid hormones T3 and T4 also stimulate surfactant secretion. Surfactant secretion is inhibited by prematurity. It means if the baby is born prematurely, the surfactant secretion in premature babies is not complete because the lungs have not matured enough to secrete adequate amounts of surfactant. Secondly, high insulin levels in the babies of diabetic mother also interfere with surfactant secretion. The diabetic mothers have hyperglycemia. This also exposes the baby to high blood glucose. Now, high blood glucose in the babies stimulates the insulin secretion, and insulin secretion, it inhibits the surfactant secretions. So, the babies of diabetic mothers are also prone to have decreased surfactant secretion, and premature babies also have decreased surfactant secretion because of lung immaturity. Again the same diagram, but now we will have a look on this diagram in a different way. This is the alveolar epithelium having two types of cells, type 1 pneumocytes and type 2 pneumocytes. Now these type 2 pneumocytes are responsible for secreting the surfactant. So these cells have granular inclusions which are lipid containing granules, and these lipid containing granules are basically the surfactant. Now this surfactant is secreted into the fluid lining the alveoli, and this presence of surfactant in this fluid, it reduces the surface tension. Now, what is the composition of surfactant? The surfactant is composed of phospholipids. The important phospholipid present in the surfactant is dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline. It has apoproteins, and the important apoprotein is apoprotein C, and it also has the calcium ions. So this is the composition of surfactant. Now, out of these three components, the dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline is the active agent which reduces the surface tension. Again, I am repeating, there are three components present in the surfactant: phospholipids, which are dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline, apoprotein C is there, and it has calcium ions. And the surface active agent or the active component which reduces the surface tension is dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline. Now we will see how does surfactant reduces the surface tension. Now consider that this is the alveolus without surfactant. This is the fluid, water lining the inner surface of alveoli. Because of the presence of air-water interface, it has tendency to retract, tendency to recoil, and cause collapse of this alveolus. Now, type 2 alveolar epithelial cells secrete surfactant. Now, this is the surfactant. Now, surfactant molecules are interspersed between the water molecules. You can see here they spread between the water molecules. These are water molecules, and this is the surfactant molecule interspersed between the water molecule. Now, when the surfactant molecules intersperse between the water molecules, they break the attractive or the cohesive forces between the water molecules. And by breaking the cohesive forces between the water molecules, it reduces the surface tension. Again, the way by which the surfactant molecules reduce the surface tension. So, without surfactant, there are strong attractive forces between water molecules, and there is high surface tension, and there is tendency for the alveolar collapse. Now, with surfactant, it is interspersed between the water molecules. We can see here, breaking the cohesive forces and reducing the surface tension and causing the lung stability. By lung stability, we mean that tendency of the alveolar collapse will decrease and there will be stability of the lung volume. Now, coming to the functions of the surfactant. The most important function of the surfactant is to reduce the surface tension. By reducing the surface tension, it increases the lung compliance. By reducing the surface tension, it reduces the tendency of alveolar collapse. Therefore, it maintains alveolar stability. And the third function of surfactant is to prevent the development of alveolar edema. It helps to keep the alveoli dry, or it prevents development of alveolar edema. Deficiency of surfactant causes a high surface tension and there can be development of edema, or there can be collection of fluid in the alveoli. So these are the functions of surfactant. Now we are going to discuss the last topic, which is an abnormal or pathological condition seen in the newborns, and this is known as respiratory distress syndrome of newborns. I am repeating, the name of the condition is respiratory distress syndrome of the newborns. It is also known as IRDS. By IRDS we mean infant respiratory distress syndrome, or it is also known as hyaline membrane disease. This disease is characterized by imperfect aeration of the lungs, and the cause of the disease is deficiency of surfactant. Imperfect aeration of the lungs due to deficient secretion of surfactant. There are different predisposing factors which include prematurity. We just discussed that premature babies have immature lungs in which are not capable of secreting sufficient amount of surfactant. So this can lead to the development of respiratory distress syndrome of newborns. Then another predisposing factor is diabetic mother, and we have discussed the mechanism in detail by which diabetic mother can make the baby prone to have respiratory distress syndrome and the deficiency of surfactant. Then thyroid deficiency in the mother, that is hypothyroidism in the mother, also predisposed to surfactant deficiency in the baby. And the smoking also decreases the surfactant formation. So these are different predisposing factors for IRDS, infant respiratory distress syndrome. Now what is the pathophysiology? What happens due to surfactant deficiency? Now when there is failure to produce surfactant, what will happen? There will be increase in surface tension. Increase in the surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli. Increased surface tension will cause an increased recoiling tendency, and it will interfere with the expansion of the lungs. Lungs will have a greater tendency to collapse, and this can even lead to respiratory failure. Again I am repeating the pathophysiology. Deficiency of surfactant will result in an increase in surface tension. Increase in surface tension will cause the lungs to collapse, and this can even lead to respiratory failure. Now what signs and symptoms are we going to see in the baby suffering from IRDS? There will be respiratory distress, dyspnea, that is difficulty in breathing, tachypnea, that is increase in respiratory rate, and there will be cyanosis. Cyanosis is bluish discoloration of the skin and the mucous membranes because of inadequate oxygenation of the blood. Now why inadequate oxygenation of the blood and cyanosis is there? This is because of the fact that lungs are difficult to expand. They have tendency to collapse. Many of the alveoli are collapsed, and there is inadequate oxygenation of the blood in the lungs. So this will cause inadequate oxygen in the arterial blood, and there will be bluish discoloration of the skin and mucous membranes. Now here are the features of respiratory distress syndrome in the babies. So tachypnea is there, which is increased respiratory rate. Respiratory rate may increase even greater than 60 per minute. There is tachycardia, that is increase in the heart rate. Cyanosis, which is bluish discoloration of the skin and mucous membrane. Now dyspnea or difficult breathing will be there, and this will be evident by grunting and nasal flaring. It will be seen, and there is recession of the intercostal spaces. So these features show respiratory difficulty or respiratory distress. Now this is, you can see, this is the cyanosis, discoloration of the lips. It's very evident, cyanosis, and this is the recession of intercostal spaces indicating respiratory distress. Now how can we treat? We can treat respiratory distress syndrome by surfactant infusion. Surfactant is given through endotracheal intubation, and we can maintain positive pressure ventilation to prevent the alveolar collapse. We can prevent this condition by giving corticosteroid injections to the mother if there is a predisposing factor for surfactant deficiency. Again, I am repeating, this is the prevention. Prevention means we can prevent the disease from happening in the baby. And how can we prevent? We can prevent it by giving the corticosteroid injections to the mother if there is a risk of, if there is presence of predisposing factor, like if there is risk of prematurity or if the mother is diabetic. So corticosteroids stimulate the surfactant secretion. And once if the baby has the IRDS, then this is the treatment: positive pressure ventilation and surfactant infusion. Now this is the last slide giving you a scenario of the IRDS. A baby was born at 32 weeks of gestation to a mother with diabetes. The baby had difficulty in breathing. On examination, had bluish discoloration of the skin, increased respiratory rate and recession of intercostal spaces. The condition from which the baby is suffering is IRDS, infant respiratory distress syndrome. In this specific case, the cause is surfactant deficiency because of prematurity and diabetes in the mother. And mechanism of development of disease we have discussed in detail, and we also have discussed the condition, we have also discussed the prevention of the condition. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you understand the lecture.